Hello and welcome to another Sacred Wisdom podcast with me, Rebecca Parks, and my co-host Chris Young. And today we will be asking Simon some questions on our connection to Mother Earth. And these questions have come from our members from all around the world. So I'm going to start off by asking the first question. Simon, please can you elaborate on Earth not being simply a rock, but a multidimensional being with a soul?
Well, if we would think of a scientist would have a very scientific way that the Earth was created, and it wouldn't contain any consciousness. It would just be a mathematical process that he or she would try and explain to you. The point is that anything that is created from something. And if we believe in God, then we believe that God creates everything. But even if you don't imagine a God in the Bible or the biblical sense, we do, I think many of us accept that there is a creational force. And so matter, life, whether it's light, whether it's energy, whether it's a physical material, it's life. And when that's bonded together to make a planet, it is imbued with consciousness. And therefore, when that Earth or planet goes through many thousands, millions of years, it learns and it remembers. But its parameters for putting that into practice are quite limited. It doesn't have arms and legs, so it can't go and create a mobile phone. It can't do anything like that because it's far more advanced. It's a spiritual development. And so what we would say is that the planet is a living ark whose job, frankly, is to not just survive by transforming itself, but its success will be judged by what it takes with it in terms of living life on its back. Okay?
Okay, thank you. So this is a two-part question, so I'll just give you the first part of it. How are crystals used for flying an aircraft and portals?
Well, most aircraft don't use crystals in the sense that they were first hoped that they would be used. There are crystals inside computers, but it's normally what we would call exotic technologies that crystals are used for. Well, we go back to the Roswell incident. The Roswell spacecraft had, I presume they were quartz, but something similar to quartz crystals, which were fixed into the nose part of the spacecraft, and it wasn't a circular disc. So people are saying, how can a flying saucer have a nose? It wasn't a flying saucer shape. It was more like a manta ray. And so crystals, if they have the right software or the right backup, are able to be active and passive. They can send out and they can receive. So crystals are used in a much more basic way in terms of our modern technology. It was the concept that crystals actually, I use it loosely, live. They don't, they vibrate. So once that it was understood that quartz has a set vibrational frequency, which is incredibly accurate, watchmakers then realized that if you stimulated it with an electric current, that's the battery, you would get this very regular beat. And some of the watch companies then decided to, in pressure chambers, artificially age crystals so that they became even more steady. So you can actually increase the accuracy of a quartz crystal by pressurizing it and putting it through heat process. So crystals are used in everyday science, but only 1/10 of what they're really available to. What was the second part of the question about crystals?
The second part you started to answer. So are there other interesting ways in which crystals are or have been used other than healing?
Well, the ruby was the first crystal that was used in the old traditional word of a laser beam, and it was a James Bond film that introduced the concept of a ruby laser before it was even announced to the public. But that's not surprising because James Bond and other films have been allowed to leak information. Crystals certainly are used for healing, and any person on this earth who is a spiritual person who has an affinity with crystals can actually help to, they can actually boost that individual's power. Unfortunately, everything's moved to war. So you have something that could have a very healing effect, but people will see the value in its warfare potential. And so what you've got is a great stream of money down a particular road, whereas the healing side doesn't really get that sort of support. But yeah, it's actually a topic worth discussing a lot more, but we'll leave it there.
Thank you. Gosh, I'm loving these answers. The next question is the Schumann resonance the heartbeat of the earth? I've got more bits to it, but the first one is
no, it's not the heartbeat of the earth. That would give a very false vision of what the earth actually is or how it operates. This, if you imagine a nuclear reaction in a star like the sun, which has a form of fuel which it burns, the earth has a form of fuel which is not based on the nuclear principle, but it sends out waves of energy which start from the center of the earth and radiate outwards. And as those frequencies pass through the earth, they make changes. Now, modern science, or at least what's prepared to be shared with students, it sort of divides the earth into several layers. So there's a crust and there's a middle part, and I can't remember my school, but there's a core and all the rest of it, whatever. But they divide the earth. Now that's down to densities. But of course, what people are not told is that the density has an effect, or the frequency has an effect on the density. So it will move through certain different types of densities at a different speed, and therefore it will have a different effect. So what's happening is the Earth is being interacted with by its own frequency, but it's having an incremental effect as it rises up through the earth because of the change in the material. And then that frequency then, what is it, Merlin? That frequency then passes up out of the earth into any organic, because it's passed through the earth, any organic being. Now, if you're on the earth, then it's assumed that you are there from an association. Come here. Right. So unfortunately, the dog determined to jump up.
No.
It's just unmanageable.
Yeah, we can see you. We can see you.
Oh, well, I can't see me. The man, sit down.
Oh, okay.
So basically, the energies are not lost on the living creatures or plants of the earth because we are seen as directly connected with a right to be there. Because otherwise, if the planet was just going to evolve itself, then these energy frequencies would only impact the rock, the material of the earth. But as they are affecting organic material, we know that this is an arrangement or an association or a contract between the earth and the living creatures on it. But those creatures, like humans, have the sovereign right to decide whether they will evolve with the earth or whether they won't, whereas a tree is far too sensible and wants to evolve and doesn't need to make those choices. Neither do animals, but people have been given this right to make a choice. So as the highest life form physically on the earth, it is down to each and every one of us whether we want to step through that portal or not. So it's a very good question. I'm sorry the dog went mad, but the dog doesn't like the
It's
fact
fine. We can
he
see
can't
fine.
he
And
can't be part of it. You see.
what's amazing is that actually I think you've answered the next questions as part of that, but I will ask them just to hone
Oh,
in on it. And you haven't seen these at all. I didn't run these past you at
no,
all.
I never want them
No.
because
So the next part of it was, does raising humanity's consciousness raise the Schumann resonance and
ah,
vice versa? And if
right,
so, how does this affect all life on Earth?
right. That's a very, very, very good question. Um, when the frequency passes through a human, it alters that human in the sense that it is trying to bring the human's physical form and energetic form up to the same frequency as the note or the tone that is going through the body. Now, what happens is that because the soul is an energy living being, it can adapt, and it almost intrinsically knows that it has to reach up or is triggered by that frequency. Now, that means that the soul of a person's body begins to outstrip, in terms of performance, their organic body. And that's why so many people feel that they've just been struck down by a bus for no reason at all, because they feel so tired and worn out, because their body is now attempting to catch up. It takes about 3 days. The body is trying to catch up with the increase of frequency that the soul is now demanding. So there's this constant rising of the soul frequency, and then the physical body has to catch up. The physical body will always lag behind because it's not purely frequency; it's matter, and so it can never run immediately in tandem with the frequency of the soul. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Simon. I think people will appreciate that answer. There's a lot of talk about it being tired and how it ties to the Schumann and physicality catching up. So thank you. Okay, next question. I've heard ether referred to as the fabric of the universe. Can you please talk about ether and its role in our relationship to Mother Earth?
No, I can't in the way you'd like me to, because that terminology is a terminology used by a particular group or sect. People who, they might talk about the firmament. It's not necessarily a religious view, but it's a particular group that will use these views, and I wouldn't use those views, because to me the word ether isn't clearly defined. So I can't answer that simply because that terminology isn't one that I would use.
Okay, thank you. What would happen if humanity's collective focus was systematically directed towards the potential for prosperity in harmony with Mother Earth?
Well, I think it would have to define what the word prosperity meant, as long as it didn't mean gold coins. Um, so,
Yeah.
but
I
if
don't know. This is from a member. I'm just thinking.
hopefully
See,
they're
they're
all
just
from,
thinking about everything in
well, hopefully they're all
triple
from
for
members.
everybody, like
Uh,
abundance.
hopefully they're all the questions are from members.
Yeah.
Yes, I was just being careful. We know that if a large number of people are of the same mindset, they are able to achieve so much more than necessarily just one person could achieve. And it's always been the way. And that is why demonstrations by citizenry are so heavily controlled by governments. Governments are absolutely terrified of people working in unison, because it is a challenge to them. They don't know what those people are going to wish and do. And so when a demonstration turns violent, then the government is greatly relieved, because if a demonstration becomes physically violent, you're not going to achieve anything like that. You might overturn a government, but you wouldn't be able to, do anything dramatic. You might say changing a government was dramatic, but for instance, when we did what we did with the Hadron Collider, if 100,000 people went and rioted, that wouldn't have had any effect on that at all. So non-violent protest, non-violent interaction is far more effective in its result than violence. And that is why always when people get together, they either want them to go to a church where a man or a woman these days can direct the people. In other words, it isn't necessarily wanted for a group of people to say, why don't we do this? So whoever's running the church can say, oh, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. And, it takes the congregation down a particular route way. In some cases, that route way is very good. And other times it's a distraction technique to prevent people from really trying to bring change. So when people operate individually, the governments are very happy about that. When people operate as a collective, and I don't mean that in a communist sense, in a collective as a group, then of course that is challenging. So of course, you think about the Essenes and Jesus and other groups, governments were very frightened of what was perceived to be an esoteric group or esoteric organizations. And these days, what governments try to do is license or control secret societies and try and have some arrangement with them. So again, that's a very, very interesting question.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How might aligning our electrical infrastructures with the frequencies of the Schumann resonance help stabilize the population's cellular health and emotional coherence?
They're not designed, the Schumann, I missed the understanding of the first bit. The Schumann resonance is not designed to do that. Only a person's acceptance of who or what they are and their ability to transcend to the next level will bring harmonic balance. So the frequency in itself is not a healing frequency in the understood terms. It is an evolutionary mechanism to speed up the development of Homo sapiens via the interaction of their soul. And that is designed to bring ultimately healing in the long term, but it is not a medical process. This is an evolutionary process with a time frame for which every planet, every star in any of the multiverses do it. Don't for 1 minute think just the Earth does this. If you think about, although we are talking materialistically now, but if you talk about two people doing the same job, Merlin, stop. If you talk about two people doing the same job, and one person you pay a bonus to, and one person you don't, and you say to the bonus person, you're going to make 100 buttons, and after the 100th button, you're going to get a bonus. Well, that person is going to make as many buttons as they can, and the other person will think, well, why should I do more than 100? I could do 120, and I'm still going to get paid the same amount. So that's it in a physical, monetary understanding. In terms of sovereignty and development, if you are rewarded for going in the right direction, you will more likely go in the right direction. If you are not rewarded, then you might not. And people could say, well, that's interference. Surely it's free will. It is free will. But God will sometimes say this is education, or it's a helping hand. So often there are things done to assist development down a certain route. And of course, the evil player will do the same their way. So in a way, both sides balance each other out, because the bad side's trying to pull you down one way and the good side down another. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is more on consciousness, but I love it, so I'll keep it in. How would global peace be affected by the scientific recognition that consciousness is not localized in the brain, but is a shared field that reacts to the collective intention?
Well, I would suggest that people like, Einstein's wife or Einstein himself, whoever you really think was the brainchild behind all that, and most of the advanced people working in, cutting edge technologies are aware of that. Because as soon as artificial intelligence was understood, and it was understood to the extent that it could be put out to the general public, to the citizens, artificial intelligence is just actually artificial consciousness. This is the point. It's not real consciousness. It's artificial. They don't like to use the word consciousness. They say artificial intelligence. Why it's not just intelligence is because artificial intelligence can learn. And the reality is that if humanity was to understand what you just said, actually it wouldn't make a big difference. What would make a big difference is everybody was telepathic. Because if everyone was telepathic, and you had that with the spiritual understanding, then nobody could lie anymore. It would just be, you couldn't lie because you'd be caught out. So it's telepathy and that type of psychic intuition that will have the greatest effect on positive side for humanity, because it would mean that the games that people play, you couldn't really play a game of poker, could you? You couldn't really play a card game for money. So you can see how money begins to fall into second place when spirituality has increased to such an extent that the very need for money is questioned. So it's not so much that, it's to do with knowing what other people are thinking. That's what will self-police our communities. And that's why off this planet, in other worlds, homicide is almost unheard of. And that's really interesting. Of course, there are other groups, alien groups, which just thrive on war. But I'm talking about the Pleiadians or the Andromedans or the Syrians or whoever you want within the fourth, upper, fifth, sixth, seventh and up. The homicide is, I wouldn't say it's never happens, but it's incredibly rare. And these are the developments that the Schumann resonance will ultimately bring about for the human race.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So, because physical reality follows our attention, if the global narrative shifts from fear of the end to the architecture of the beginning, will the quantum probability of innovative solutions skyrocket?
Yes. As long as humanity can work as a team, as a group, rather than what we have at the moment, which is very gifted individuals. Merlin, sit down. Very gifted individuals who are contracted to certain secret organizations, and therefore their findings are not actually shared. So as humanity develops right across the board, it becomes harder and harder for the elite to control that or to, compartmentalize it. And it becomes very obvious to everyone that the status quo has changed. So the answer in short is yes to that.
Okay, thank you. The next question we had to keep in. What is your opinion, dear Simon, on the flat Earth?
Next question.
Before we do move on with that, I actually heard a really interesting answer. And I know you've answered this in the past, years ago, where you talked about it being like the Earth in physical reality, in the 3D, it is a globe. But if you move higher up, then it becomes more of a disc in the
Right.
sense of how it's recorded. And I heard something else answer it like this as well. And the higher you go, the more it seems as a holographic
Right.
space with many LED
Right.
parts to it.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so I'm not letting you get away from that without.
Well, it's just, that tells people clearly what I think. Merlin, sit down. The world that we're on, Merlin, sit down. The world that we're on is definitely round shape. It is. It's not flat. But, and there was a but, if you think about that wonderful film, The Matrix, when Neo is shown by the young child, there is no spoon. And those of you who've watched the film know that the spoon bends. So what I've tried to say many, many times is that, and I've tried to show it how that concept is rooted in our physical world. A CD or a DVD, of course, it's my generation that grew up with that and used that. The younger people perhaps don't even know what a DVD is. So they're flat. Now, interestingly enough, if you look at, say, the solar system, and you look at, you were to get, the Hubble telescope, and you were to zoom in on the Earth, then you would come back and come back and come back, and you would see all of it. It actually is like a flying saucer in shape. It's actually flat on the edges and bulges in the middle. So it's just like a flying saucer. And if I put a DVD into my old-fashioned DVD player, and I have a screen, and I have a 3D picture television, I can watch pictures in 3D. So I might be standing on a round Earth, and certainly are standing on a round Earth, but the concept of its creation is holographic. And the information of all of this might be contained in that Hubble telescope zooming out picture of not a disc as such, but a disc with a bulging middle, a bit like a traditional flying saucer. So the Earth is round, but it is a concept. It is a matrix. It is something that's put on. You yourself, Becky, have been in a car with me, and then we've driven along the road, and then where did all those cars go? We were in a road with about 30 or 40 other cars, and unfortunately we weren't,
We really were.
double checking.
We were in a, yeah. I
Where have they
remember
all
that.
gone?
We said, where did all the cars go? We were
Where
in a
have they all gone?
busy road, and everything disappeared apart from our car. That was so weird.
Well,
Yeah,
it's weird because we try to look at it from the textbook side of it, but if we were to understand that this is a creation, then that is those who are the infillers and those that are not. And so it's a very difficult question to answer. No, it's not difficult for me to answer, but it's difficult for me to successfully impart what I'm saying, because some people say, oh, well, he's talking about a disc. He's talking about a flat Earth, therefore the Earth is flat. No, I'm not saying that. The Earth is really round. It's physically round. There is a spoon. Until someone says there is no spoon, then the Earth is going to be the Earth. However, what brought it about is a combination of what we would call I don't know, something beyond our understanding, but others would call it's just technology, and a creational force which we as human beings do not possess. We don't have that capability, but something has that capability and has created a wonderful environment for our species to experience. So, you know, it's a test. I don't like the view of a goldfish bowl. I don't like the view of a zoo. It's far more important than that. It's not about let's see how the animals are doing in their prison. This is much more about is this group going to evolve, and you know, what can we do to assist them in that? So the earth is round, but if you were to look at it from another dimension, you might not perceive anything in the round. And finally, to help people out, if you in Britain you turn your tap on, in America it's called a faucet, or some states call it a tap, and the droplet of water comes out, the droplet of water doesn't fall as a perpendicular or a horizontal line, does it? It falls as a droplet, and then the further it falls, the more it goes into a sort of a rounded shape. Now that should be the giveaway. And that is because the frequency and the dimension that we are in, the energies are equally placed all around objects. And so water takes the round shape, just as when the earth was created in the dimension that we're currently in, and when it was created, it takes the round shape. So if a water comes out of your tap and it's perpendicular or horizontal, then you are living on a flat earth. But if the water's coming out and it forms a round, it's round. Why is a football or a soccer ball round? Yeah, I know that American football is not round, but the soccer ball is round. So many things are round. Why is a wheel round? Why is a clock in a circle, a traditional clock, 1 to 12? Why isn't that in a line, 1 and to 12 in a long line with the arm moving along it? Why is it all circular? Because we are in a dimensional field that wants things in a round shape. Round is seen as soft, maybe feminine. It's seen as right. Something that's angular or sharp is seen as masculine and not as nice. So that's another good question. I've taken time on this one. I've done my best. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. So the next question, there's 2 parts. The first part is Earth a being that dreams through us?
Did you say Eden?
No, is Earth a being that dreams through us? Do you?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. No, it doesn't need to. What can happen is that the human consciousness can communicate with the earth, and then communicate with the earth, and then that communication is brought back to the person's body, and some parts of that will be shared. Now, the earth doesn't need to dream through people. What the earth does is it wants to envisage its pattern so that people want that pattern to take place. So the earth might say, my vision for the next 10,000 years is this, this, and this. And so it would attempt to communicate or move people so that they would deliver the intention of the earth. That's it, very crudely and very rough. But they don't actually dream, but people can be drawn to the earth and receive a message. It's quite common's not the right word, is it? But it's quite known amongst UFO experiences that benevolent aliens, benevolent non-humans will subject humans to images of the earth being blown apart, which is very dramatic, but is the best way that they thought they could say to a person, look, this is what will happen if you don't, become more in one with the earth. So there is a knowledge amongst more advanced beings that unless the living creatures associated with a planet that's going through an evolutionary phase, unless they work with the planet, it will either cause the planet just to say, well, I've had enough of this, it didn't work, goodbye, or it'll be the end of the living creatures on the back of that planet. Okay.
Thank you. So the second part of the question said, if the answer is yes, but I'm going to ask this anyway, so you can weigh it and do it. So if the answer is yes, what visions of beauty and balance must we hold in our collective consciousness so that Pachamama may manifest a reality of abundance?
Every individual is different, and what makes one person tick that doesn't actually make another person tick. That's why people join esoteric schools, so that they as a group may share the vision. Okay. Connecting Consciousness is not an esoteric school. We don't have the money for that. You have to be very rich to have an esoteric school on this planet. And that's why Jesus didn't run an esoteric school. But if you run an esoteric school, you have a document to which you, as a member, have signed up to in terms of what you have to do with the others to actively communicate and change the world. Now, sometimes these esoteric schools, what they want to bring about is not necessarily beneficial for all of humanity. It's just beneficial for an elite group. And that's one of the issues here. So I do believe that it's best to be sovereign and independent and join organizations because you like the values that they have. But when a group starts saying, right, well, we're going to have a meditation to do this, or we're going to do that, or what have you, and it begins to look like the group is trying, or the organization is trying to carve out in government for itself, or trying to derail some form of natural development, then we should call into question that particular group. That's one of the reasons why in Connecting Consciousness we do so few worldwide meditations, because they are incredibly powerful, and we really should only use them for they're our fallback position, whereas a lot of esoteric societies are doing it on a regular basis, and some of those are not many of them are not for the best causes of humanity. Many of it are self-aggrandizement, in other words, to make that organization more wealthy, not for no reason. Is the Bank of England in the United Kingdom on a nexus point of ley lines? It's not just Stonehenge that sits on ley lines. There are other organizations that have created buildings to take that energy and use it for not necessarily good purposes. So I believe in individuality, and I believe in sovereignty.
Do you know, we Chris and I have been writing about that in our next topic on ley lines, and
don't ask me the same question then.
And we haven't shown that to you yet to read.
No.
Again, we're on the same lines, as it were.
Okay. Very clever.
So the next question is, and it's about evolutionary ethics on origin and destiny.
Okay.
How can we ensure that our technological progress is an act of conscious evolution that honours our ancestors and the Earth's past and protects the 7 generations to come?
Because one should always say, what will I be using anything I create for? It's that clear. So, when the guy invented dynamite, he did so because he said too many people are being killed in the mines, hand chipping away with picks and shovels, and this dynamite will help you blast away, and you can light the fuse and run away and blow a hole and come back again. And then someone took it, and he may have got a very big award for it, and it spun lots of awards afterwards, but it was used for war, for bombs. So when we create something, we should say, why are we creating it? And how do we prevent it falling into the wrong hands? The wrong hands is it's a concept here, because the person who doesn't believe in war believes it is wrong to give it to somebody who does believe in war. And someone who believes in war thinks it's against the country's interests and against national security, and against the safeguarding of that country to keep it away from them. So you see, you have two very different visions and views. So you've got one who's charged with defending the country, and they want all of it for that. And you've got another group who just want a development for the earth. They want to transcend it. And unless your spirituality is running around par with your technological advancement, it will always go to war, because we're not yet at a social, psychic, spiritual level where we can stop being fearful of our neighbor. And so this type of environment that we're in is a product of our technological abilities outstripping our spiritual abilities. So it was in a Doctor Who, the Americans now are going to know this, but there'll be many in Europe who don't know it, a Doctor Who series right back, with John Pertwee playing the Third Doctor, where an underground reptilian race called the Silurians, I believe, the episode series, and referred to humans as upstart apes. Very clever. A lot of esoteric people used to write Doctor Who, and we've talked about it before, Becky, where people were brought in with esoteric knowledge to help Doctor Who become quite a go-to program. So it would be fair to say that we are upstart apes because we have not yet connected with our higher selves. We haven't drawn the 12 strands of DNA into the 2 physical strands we have. We haven't yet understood that we're not the only thing in the multiverse. Hell, we haven't, as a people, even understood there's a multiverse. So until that can happen, you can see why the Knights Templars have been hiding particular artifacts, because they just don't trust the world with them. Now, you could argue that, that they have them, but they see themselves as the guardians. And I suppose the real test for them will be when the human race has reached a level where we don't need that. So again, we're getting some really good questions this time.
Okay, thank you. How can we repair the damage caused by microplastics, compacted and sealed soils, etc., as quickly as possible? Seeing how people treat Mother Earth makes me sad.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, we can't. What you can do is you can actually heal yourself to some extent from these attacks. But only governments can actually pass laws to change what occurs in their country. And again, until spirituality has reached a level where people appreciate that the earth is a living creature, you know, in Great Britain, United Kingdom, a new law has just been passed, which means, and it's incredible, isn't it, that a dog and a cat are no longer seen as the property of the owner. A dog and a cat in law now are seen as living creatures with their own rights. However, they are owned by or cared for X, Y, or Z, who will make decisions about their life. But a law is actually passed to recognize that animals are not just the dumb creatures. So there are movements afoot, but it will take laws through institutions before it becomes effectual. Because why would big corporations spend money that they don't have to? Why would bad guys, you know, prevent their own operation unless they're forced to? And so, you know, we just have to trust that the white hats are doing what they need to do to try to heal some of the physical damage that's been done to the earth. But as individuals, there are certain things that we can do. There are certain frequency elements that are available that can help tremendously. You can, within the confines of how much money you have to spend, you can eat and drink to the best of your ability with purity and limit the damage that has been done. So we are waiting for the world to catch us up. And that's not me being arrogant. We are waiting for the world to catch up the membership of connecting consciousness who perceive and see and understand and actually have a pretty good handle on where we need to go. But of course, where we want the earth to go, a very large corporation would start shaking at the thought of that, because you know they have created their empire on the understanding of a very simple, you know, you do this, I do that, and I make money. And of course, people like us say, well, actually, there's a bit more to it than that. So, yeah, it's an ongoing battle. However, there are changes afoot, but that's perhaps for a later date.
Okay, thank you. What is our spiritual connection to Mother Earth and Gaia, and why does it matter?
There is actually a covenant between human consciousness and the earth. Lottie Shush. So the earth has a consciousness, and the earth has invited humanity to thrive, not necessarily to come here, but to thrive. These are my rules. These are the rules of the game. Free will, you don't have to do it, but if you want to thrive. So there is a covenant between the wider consciousness, the greater consciousness, which many individuals don't wish to adhere to. But those humans who do adhere to that as best they can under the modern living are trying to fulfill the covenant between the earth and its chosen senior race, shall we say. And that covenant is literally, you know, from the day one. And that's got nothing to do with aliens or anything like that. It's literally a mother wanting its children as it sees it to survive. And there has to be rules of some sort. It's a covenant. So that's that. What was the second part of the question? I missed the second part. The dog's taking my mind away.
Why does it matter?
Right. Because if enough people hold to that covenant, then the earth will develop faster and we will evolve with the earth. And if you don't evolve with it, then the earth might wash its hands of, you know, the operation. It might just say, well, I gave it my best and it didn't work. I'm not being flippant. That's a real possibility.
I've got a question to ask. So going back to the flood and Enki and Enlil. And when Enlil decided that humanity was out of control and it was time to have a flood, would Enki have worked with the earth, or no, Enlil worked with the earth, or just made a decision?
Nobody worked with the earth in that environment. No, that's the earth wouldn't play ball with that at all. No, because that's not right. What happened is that this non-human race convinced itself that the people on the earth were beholden to them. In other words, that they were responsible for their creation, and therefore they could kill them or whatever they wanted. But you see, when humans evolved, they had their own consciousness, and that consciousness connected with the planet. And then the planet made this deal with consciousness, not each an individual one, but with the mass of human consciousness. And so this is separate from Enlil and Enki. It's got nothing to do with them. What modern technology could do was melt the ice caps and start to alter the tilt of the earth by just a few degrees. So a combination of the earth tilting and the melting of the ice caps created the Great Flood. But that had nothing to do with the earth. In terms of those humans that were saved, that isn't, there's a precedent for that, because it was the same at the Garden of Eden, where the original human race was saved from extinction. And so this had already happened then. So fast forward a very long time to the future, which was the final flood. There was a precedent where a member of the high family would actually save a portion of the human race for their own reasons, not because they wanted to communicate with the earth, but because they had grown an attachment, and those humans contained the genetics of that line, and therefore they felt that they had to keep that line going. Remember, hybrids do have the ability to challenge full aliens. And that's what was occurring. If you hybridized, you do have, you've broken free from the normal human run. And those people were a threat because they turned against their masters, as it was seen. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, yes.
Good.
Okay. Is Mother Earth a real spiritual being or goddess with intrinsic attributes, or a metaphor? And then there's a second part.
No, none of that's right. It is a living entity whose only goal is to evolve and take with it on its surface that which is in tune with it. That's what the Schumann resonance is about. What's the second part?
The second part, how true is the idea that she has felt but unseen capabilities?
I don't understand the first part. Felt unseen capabilities.
That she has felt but unseen capabilities.
Well, unseen by who? Does the questioner write unseen by who?
I think it means felt by humans, but unseen by them. It's a bit like the Schumann resonance.
People who communicate or have the ability to be communicated with, it's not chance, it's absolutely meant to be. And so, you know, sometimes the earth will need people to assist it, to help it. And that's why so many from Cyrus or Sirius over the last 25 years have incarnated here, because the oceans of the world needed help. And those from Cyrus or Sirius are incredibly connected to dolphins. Not the only race, the Pleiadians are, but that the Syrians are more. Pelagians wouldn't like that, but that's the truth. And so sometimes the Earth will send a call out for help, but that's on a high frequency wavelength, and it would want people to incarnate here because it's its own technicians that help to manage it, like the whales in the deep oceans, or believe it or not, the fairies, which are very real, and have fortunately been able to be shown video of one. And before anybody says, was it AI? No, it was 20 years ago, and it was well before AI was available like that. So sometimes the Earth needs help over and above it. And if it's a long-term project, then it will do that. If you've got, say, Fukushima, you need immediate help. So you need that help straight away. But if you're saying, well, look, we've got changing patterns of weather here, which perhaps the Earth isn't that keen on, or humans are doing something and it's projected in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years that this would be quite serious, then you can start to bring in souls. Lottie, stop it. You can start to bring in souls that are very, very ecologically minded, and not just that, but in a specific way. So, you were to go to a college and find young people who come from Cyrus or Sirius. So many of them want to work, with the oceans and the water and the plants. And that was a key element that we've had over the last 30 years, where the Earth's been under attack in that field. So, that is the way it happens. There are people who say that, they speak to the Earth, or the trees talk to me. I'm not going to say one way or the other on that, but my understanding is that it's a more general type of energy. So, for instance, to finish off, the old adage of the super tanker, and you see an obstruction ahead. Well, you'd better see that obstruction, 20 years ahead, because by the time you've turned the wheel and the ship has actually maneuvered away from it, it's pretty touch and go. So a lot of these issues that we have now were foreseen 20, 30 years ago by the Earth. And its best way of doing that is the way we've talked about, because big companies, big corporations, and governments aren't going to see that. And that's why certain non-Earth humans have interacted directly with governments and said, you need to stop this because it's going to have a detrimental effect on the Earth. So that's really how the Earth brings change about.
Okay, thank you. So how does our relationship with Mother Earth affect our spirituality and vice versa? For example, does disconnection cause feelings of sadness or loss?
No, because the Earth will never disconnect from a person that loves it or cares for it. And if a person loses that connection with the Earth, it's because they have fundamentally changed their value-based system, or they have switched off, So you would never be willingly separated from something unless you have changed. And the great thing about the more advanced creatures, and I count the Earth in this, is that they don't have a limited time span like people. You buy a child. It's a bit unfair, really, but you buy most children a fish tank, and for the first day, they sit there staring at it, and they look after it, and the next day and the week go by, and they look after it, and they clean it, and then after a while, Mum notices they're not cleaning the fish anymore, and Mum has to start doing it. And the child is bored. This is the condition of humanity. The child's bored and wants to do something else. Fortunately, the higher beings stay with it. They are consistent. It's because they live longer. The earth lives forever, really. A lot of these aliens live for 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years. So their ability to stay with it is incremental to their lifespan. And that is why, unfortunately, big corporations have really utilized this failing in humanity, because we buy a drink, let's just call it I don't know, an orange drink, and after 6 months the sales start going down. So you have to change the packaging. So we're going to put this nice red stripe down the side of it, and we're going to call it new improved. And then the sales go back up again. Then 6 months later, the sales drop. So you then have got to change the packaging. It's because people get bored. They don't have the staying power. They want something new all the time. And that's why emails, text messaging, instant communication is so right up the street of humanity, because that's what it wants. It feeds off it. So you've got RV commentators giving updates 2 or 3 times a day, and people avidly listening to it because they want to know what is happening. Whereas if we were more grounded and more balanced, we wouldn't need external stimuli to make us feel valued or to give us that kick. Some people use cocaine, some people use drink, but that is because people are not looking at themselves and what they really need to stimulate themselves, which is a spiritual life, a consciousness experience. And while we are still in physical bodies, we unfortunately are pulled in all these directions. So this is what divides people into those that actually understand the true path and those that are following a path that others have laid out for them, like corporations, like governments, who have all the tools at their disposal. They have the education system, they have the law, they have all of these things which make it very difficult for truly truth seekers to stay with. But that's part of the challenge, isn't it?
Okay, thank you. So you have maybe answered the first part of this already. Is it necessary for survival or spiritual growth to believe in the sacredness of Mother Earth?
Yes, it's vital if you're going to go on to the next stage of your development, wherever that might be, because to either fail to recognize it or to deny it is to fail to accept that the parenting relationship between you as a young entity on a planet that's billions of years old is to fail to understand your relationship in time and space. And if you fail, if you can't grasp that, then you're not ready. It's not about being not worthy enough, but you're not ready to go to the next class higher up. And so you have to go through it again until such time as you do get that, and then you're promoted to the next test. And that is what it's all about. We talked earlier when we started, it's about rewarding people. And here on the earth, we like to be rewarded with kindness and praise and love. But that doesn't pay the rent, does it? So money is the best way to reward people who need to be able to pay their rent, all the rest of it. So this is why it's always a fight between people just seeing reward as financial, as opposed to reward being something great. And it's fascinating if you see children, young children, that a reward can be acceptance and recognition from somebody that they hold dear. And a dog will want that recognition from you. Whereas the child grows up, it then says, well, I'll take the garbage out if you're American, but I want a quarter at 25 cents. And that's the changeover when suddenly people, they feel that reward is financial rather than a symbiotic relationship with the earth that we are privileged to be on.
Okay, thank you. So how does destroying her affect our ability to know God and ourselves?
Well, the good thing is that she's not being destroyed, that she can't be destroyed. That's an important point. Ultimately, the earth will evolve with or without us. The relationship between humanity and earth is no different than the relationship between one human and another human, or a human and another living creature with the soul in it. So that you can't really say that is more important than that. Remember, Jesus was basically saying, who's worse, somebody who kills one person or someone who kills 100 people? These are very deep questions. Unfortunately, the people at the time weren't evolved enough to be able to understand that. So it's about valuing everything, because you could say, I love the earth, and you could go up and pick, all the plastic bags up, and make sure the local water is clean, and you can do all these great things, and then you can be an absolute nasty person. So how does that work? If you have a understanding of spirituality, then you'll try and even it all out. So you'll be trying to be decent to everyone, including the earth. You'll be, not segregating that the earth is different from my neighbor next door. I'll go and kick the dog, but I'll go and, make sure that the garbage is out of the local river. It doesn't work like that. So it's about trying to be the best that you can in the amount of time given to you. Try to be the best you can with the time that you have on this earth.
Okay, thank you. So how do we connect or reconnect with Mother Earth? Do simple ways like grounding, awareness, gratitude, or spending time in nature help?
We shouldn't see the earth like God. We shouldn't see it in the same way. The God of the Old Testament wanted certain things done in certain ways, because the people then were far more primitive than they are now. And so all we should be doing is reminding the earth that we still honor it. And that's a really important point. So you take your shoes and your socks off and you go to a place where there's been no construction and the earth is as it was as long as you can remember, then you are connecting with the living being that hasn't had a house built on it 100 years ago and or a highway put through it. And you are opening the clearest channel you can between you and the sentient being, which is the earth. And that's very important, because if you accept that you have a relationship with the earth, not I can build a house where I want and I can go and mine for precious and I can do this and I can do that. But if you have the ability to say that I do live side by side with you, the earth is more likely to accept that. Remember that God gave man, I use the word loosely because that's the Bible, God gave people the right to have, quote, dominion over the earth, which means you can dig for coal, you can go get oil. And that is why oil hasn't run out. Because if it was a finite resource, as we are told, it would have long gone. It would have long gone. It would have all been used up. So the truth isn't being given. And if you're a big corporation, it's in your interest to say out there, well, we've only got 25 years of oil left, because that keeps the price really high. If the oil corporation said, look, there's oil for another 1,000 years, you'd be paying $1 a barrel. So there's a lot of politics going on, and the earth is not quite what, modern science has said it was. So take your shoes off, connect with the earth, and say to yourself, I recognize you. I thank you for nurturing me and for providing me with a method to evolve. And, I'm very grateful. And that's all you need to do. You don't need to do anything else. Now, indigenous nations who had a very long tradition of just doing what I've said worked not individually, but worked as groups who would have rituals to honor the earth and to recognize it. And that's purely because they, as a family, as a group, were putting into practice what they believed. Whereas unfortunately, in the modern world, outside of these indigenous nations, we are highly individualized. And it's very difficult to find a group outside of connecting consciousness that, get a party of 10 or 20 together and go out and do something like that. And it's not that the earth forgets, because the earth will never forget, but it will check in with you. So when you reconnect, it will check in and say, oh yeah, that person's still, a true believer. And you would expect to see some benefits of some sort, not monetary, but you would expect to see some benefits. And it will make you better, because if you can connect with the earth, you will feel better. After all, it's what we're on. If you are on a rocket ship, okay, you're on a rocket ship and you're flying to the moon, and the rocket has a big engine, because it'd be very old fashioned now, and the rocket is shaking. That's a frequency it's shaking at. Okay, could be a bus. You're going across the desert in a bus, and the bus is shaking. People say, oh, I feel seasick, or I feel road sick, or I feel air sick. Okay, that's because that shaking is not in the same frequency as your body is naturally vibrating at. But imagine if you brought your shaking, quote, your frequency, to the same frequency that the rocket is shaking, or the bus is shaking, or the airplane is shaking. You then become connected and part of the vehicle that is taking you from A to B. That's what the Schumann resonance is. Because if we connect with that frequency, we are part of that frequency, and therefore our journey is more pleasant, and is assured. So that's the best way that I can explain what's going on with that.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll just dip in here. We've got a thunderstorm coming.
Okay.
It's just
Well, we've been going
just-
for an hour and 15
we
minutes.
have. Shall we just ask 2 more questions? I mean,
Sure.
we're pretty much near the end of our question list anyway. So, Chris, just one more from you, and then one more from me, and we'll call it a day. Because I know that our
Okay.
dogs are going to get unsettled. I think that's why they've been a bit antsy actually today.
Okay. So
What's antsy?
Stressed and
What
bothering you. Lottie
what's
and Merlin
no? What's the word antsy mean?
like stressed and bothering you.
Oh, I know. Well, is
I
it
don't know.
short
I
for
don't know if I
something?
made it up or just heard it. I don't
No,
know.
no, it's a
Word
word.
I'm
I just
using.
wondered if it was. I mean, anyone in America will be tapping their head saying, "What are you talking about?"
Okay, I mean it in terms of Lottie and Merlin are both sort of
Well, Lottie
clamping
just
your
wanted
intention.
Lottie wanted a chew. There was Freya's chew
Oh,
was sitting on the
okay.
table, and finally she's got the chew, and then she's got what she wants. No, that's fine. Carol, do 2 questions.
Yeah, and then we'll finish. Okay.
We will.
Okay, so can Mother Earth act as a spirit guide, and how does she show herself, for example, through crystals or animals?
Well, this probably will upset a few people. In short answer, no. Not in the way that what humans, we've got to be very careful, because voodoo and other magics have tried to use that. We often in the Western world talk about spirit guides. We do have to be careful, because the word spirit isn't quite what we should perhaps be, the terminology isn't quite right. Scientists will explain to you how a piece of quartz crystal is created in the earth with pressure and heat. And they don't really explain how it imbued with a frequency all of its own. They don't really, that doesn't get taught really. But the point is that if we have objects from the earth, just because we have separated them from the earth, it doesn't mean that they die. This is the concept that people don't get, many people don't get. So an object still retains the life force, because it's still in the radius of the energy field of the earth. If you were to take something outside, jump on our famous space rocket, then the only way it connect with the earth is if consciousness could transcend. And it would be very interesting to go into multi-dimensions to see if consciousness from the earth can transcend through different frequencies, which we would call dimensions. So that's why objects do have not their own consciousness, but the shared consciousness of where they've come from. And so you can use things as tools for healing, but you're really using them to enhance your own healing. It's very disempowering, God aside, to try to draw in energy from somewhere else so that you have the power to heal. The reality is that resides in those people that have discovered it. And crystals in particular can focus or transmute that frequency to a different frequency, which has a more powerful effect. There are certain crystals that people are drawn to. Crystals are very important, far more effective than a lump of granite. Granite has, quartz and mica and all the rest of it, feldspar, but a lovely quartz crystal that's as fairly pure as you can get will magnify your abilities. So it's not that you're drawing in, you are providing it. It's like a booster station. It's sending out. That's what crystals do. They can send out and receive, but they have to have the intention. And therein lies the key. When you put the intention into something, you either put the intention into it to stay there, or you intend to transmit that intention to something else, and you can use a crystal to do that. But this is a very difficult road, because now you are leaving the kindergarten and you're going into the big world, and someone will pick up that you are transmitting, other than a radio set, that you are psychically transmitting, and that will bring a lot of attention to you. A lot of people who have out-of-body experiences, they get both sides of the fence suddenly interested in them, that they have shown they have that capability, right through from physicality of the CIA being interested in you because you have that, to non-human entities in other dimensions becoming interested in you. So just be careful. If you put your head above the parapet, expect to be connected, so suspect to be called upon, because when America detonated the first nuclear bomb, it brought a shitstorm down on the human race, and you were advertising as a people that you had now moved to the next level. And therefore, if you start, transmitting, shall we say, then you are advertising your presence. So yeah, it's not a play school out there. It's a very challenging world.
Thank you. Oh, you say we'd advertised we'd gone to the next level. It wasn't in terms of spirituality, it was in terms of using technology that was more advanced than our spirituality as a humanity.
Yeah, I'm saying, for instance, when in 2015, Connecting Consciousness did a worldwide meditation in regard to the Hadron Collider, the CERN device, it brought Connecting Consciousness fully to the attention of the Pentagon. It brought us fully to the attention of the Vatican, and it brought us fully to the attention of non-Earth entities, both good, bad, and indifferent. So when you do something that you're not supposed to do, or you're not slated to do, or you're not supposed to be capable of doing, but you do it, then you put your head above the parapet and you advertise the fact that you have broken free and you do have some access to some of these hidden knowledges. And then the world wants to know, who are you? What are you doing? So we do have to be very careful when we break cover.
Thank you. Yeah. So the last few questions really are more about grounding, connecting with the earth, and things that we've covered already. But I've got one last question that we haven't touched upon at all.
All right.
We have discussed a bit about Earth as a globe or flat Earth and so on. But what about? Can you tell us a little bit about Admiral Byrd? What did he find? How did he find it? And how is the Earth perhaps perceived to be hollow?
Oh, God. Well, what's naughty is this being the last question.
I know it's a bit big, but I'm sure you can answer it.
Well, I can answer it. Thank you for believing that I can answer it. But I will answer it. But what I would say to you is that, God willing, when we get time, maybe we could just do one question in half an hour, and then we can really go into the topics, and that would be really fascinating. I don't mean here. I mean, I could do my own podcasts. Right. Okay. When in 1941 in Missouri, alien spacecraft deliberately crashed. 1941. Material was taken from that. And then in 1942, in Louisiana, and it's both in America, another crash, material was taken from that. The reason that I am answering this question, and I'll probably forget what the question was by the time I get through this. The reason that America did nothing with it was fighting a war against Germany and Japan, and everything was put on hold. When the war was finished and the Roswell incident occurred, do not believe the stories that are put out. Those in the top knew exactly what was going on. Absolutely no question about it. What they didn't know was which race was behind it. They didn't know anything like that. They just knew this wasn't Earth. But they did put the message out to all their scientists, check it out in case it's a Russian spacecraft. But that was really just to try and cover up the tracks. So in 1945, when America largely, not solely, but largely won the war in the West, it did so because it was absolutely determined to obtain as much advanced technology that aliens, and I use the word aliens, had gifted Nazi Germany, just as the two crashes in 1941 and 1942 had gifted America. Remember, those of you who've listened to me before, that the difference was that when the Americans obtained the two fallen spacecraft in 41 and 42, they took the cold fusion nuclear reactor and said, as we talked again in this program earlier, how can we make a bomb out of this? How sad. How can we make a weapon out of it? When in 1933, alien spacecraft crashed in the Black Forest in Germany, and Hitler's Nazis got hold of it, they didn't go down that route of saying, oh, look at this cold fusion nuclear reactor. How do we make a bomb out of it? What they said was, how do we make a flying craft like this? So these two superpowers went their own way with what they had. And what the Germans did not have was the ability to detonate a nuclear bomb. And it's not easy. The Americans had that. So just remind me the end question, the end part of the question again.
So the question was,
I
well,
know
how
I'll get
does this
rid of it.
connect with Admiral Byrd
Yeah.
and Antarctica and
So-
finding maybe Hollow Earth?
Right. So it's the Hollow Earth bit that I'd forgotten. Okay. So by the time Roswell had occurred, which is, sometime after the end of the war, 47, America at the top was fully aware of what was going on. It didn't have the ins and outs of it, but it knew that. It also knew, and this is where we've got to be a bit careful, it also knew that Adolf Hitler was not dead in the bunker. All right. Absolutely, it knew that Hitler wasn't dead. And also was aware that through connections in Tibet and other locations, that the Third Reich was creating a Fourth Reich, South America, and in the cold region. And so they sent dear old Admiral Byrd and a war party, not just a few ships to take pictures of penguins or what have you. Do you get penguins there? Can't remember. It's one side you get penguins and one side you don't.
Antarctica penguins and
Oh, yes, the other one that you don't, isn't it?
polar bears in the north.
Polar bears, yeah. So they knew exactly what they were looking for, and they found it. And it was an entrance. And some members of his team were killed, lost. But he himself wasn't. And they have a pattern here when you go onto an alien spacecraft, they generally don't kill you. They generally are very proud to show you around. That's classic. They show you around and then they let you go. And that's exactly what happened. He got shown round and he was shown the level of technology that they had. And what I want to make clear is that the Nazis weren't in control of it. This was not a Nazi base. This was a base run by others that the Nazis were invited to because of their previous associations. So the Nazis were operating, coming and going, but it wasn't their base. And that's why, right up to the end time of President Obama, there was all that action around that, because it was a community that you did deals with, and that was it. And when Trump came on, he didn't do deals in the same way. Trump made a sort of different arrangement, a more positive arrangement. So Admiral Byrd totally saw the truth, but that's what he was supposed to see. I mean, that's why they sent him there. They wanted to gauge the level of military effectiveness that this community under the ice actually had. They wanted to know how many there were, what equipment they had, what their stores were. Now, they didn't gain that sort of knowledge, but what they got the knowledge was that they were not capable, America was not capable at that time of defeating it. And through the time, treaties have been made. So it's no longer a war footing. Treaties have been made. And when Trump came in his first term, that treaty basis changed. The type of treaty completely changed. The relationship completely changed. So I feel sorry, as I've always done, for these people who, unlike me, were not allowed to tell the truth. So these people who were part of the military and the military owned them, they couldn't willingly tell the truth for fear of reprisals. And they wanted to, and they did start to tell the truth, and then they had to backtrack or change their story. Think of Mac Brazil and the others from the Roswell time who told the truth and then suddenly got a visit from somebody and then said, no, there's nothing in it at all. The funniest thing about that I always remember being briefed on was how Mac Brazil, and if you don't know it, have a read of it. I don't know if you'll find it out there, but I was briefed on this, was that he left. He left the community and he packed up and left. And he left in a brand new pickup truck, brand new, and bought a farm somewhere else. So that's what happens. You're either paid off or you're killed. If they can't threaten you. It depends on the level that you're at. So Admiral Byrd was a serving officer. He was owned by the military, so he couldn't do anything without their permission. And when he started talking, he had to backtrack very quickly and say it wasn't true. The poor old Jesse Marcel and Blanchard and all the others who, had to go along with a weather balloon story, even though, they just knew in their guts that it was totally nonsensical. But if you are signed up, then you have to do what the paper says. It's a contract, and you should know better. And it's like people who sign contracts and then renege on them. What do you expect? If you are released from that contract, then that's different. But just because you retire from the military service doesn't mean that you're free from your contract. My grandfather physically retired from the CIA, MI6, in 1960. So he was 65 years old in 1960, but he still worked for CIA for another 5 years. And then they said to him, you are freed, you're no longer required. And he kept his nose clean in terms of the way he was with them. And unless you are freed from duty, you will always be held accountable for what you say. And, people who, become truth speakers, they better make sure that they're protected. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's been thank you for that answer. It was fascinating, and thank you as well for the whole podcast. This has actually been my favourite. Just to officially say that it's actually been my favourite Q&A because
some lovely questions.
I've loved all the I've loved all the answers as well as the questions. I've loved the answers. So thank you very much. And just over to Chris now.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. I just echo that they were great questions, but also great answers, and I'm sure everyone will enjoy this. So thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chris, for doing it, and thank you, Becky, for doing it, and thank you to the members who bothered to put those questions in, and I hope that you enjoy the answers you got. And if you put a question in and I didn't get around to it, I'm really sorry. Maybe you'll be lucky next time.
We did almost all of them, and anyway, prayers. The thunder and lightning's here now.
It is.
We're going to have to look after our dogs.
Okay. All right. God bless.